Jungkook sacrifices his greatest dream to honor a promise to Jimin, uncovering a life-changing truth that forever reshapes their destiny. "Don't sign it!" Jimin's desperate voice tore through the silent concert hall just as Jungkook's trembling fingers hovered over the golden contract that would make him the youngest international music director in the country's history. The echo of Jimin's shout crashed against the empty rows of crimson seats like thunder, startling the executives gathered around the polished oak table. Pens froze in midair. Cameras stopped recording. Even the old clock above the stage seemed to hesitate before ticking again. Jungkook slowly lifted his eyes. Across the vast auditorium, Jimin stood beneath the dim emergency lights, soaked by the relentless rain outside. Water dripped from his black coat onto the wooden floor, forming tiny pools that reflected the pale glow of the stage lamps. His chest rose and fell violently as if he had run through the entire city without stopping. His usually calm expression had disappeared, replaced by unmistakable fear. It was not the fear of losing a friend. It was the fear of watching destiny repeat its cruelest mistake. Jungkook looked back at the contract, waiting for his signature. Years of sacrifice, sleepless nights, endless auditions, and impossible competitions had led to this single moment. Every mentor had told him that opportunities like this appeared only once in a lifetime. One signature would fulfill the dream he had carried since childhood, the dream that had survived poverty, loneliness, rejection, and heartbreak. Yet all he could hear was Jimin's trembling voice calling his name. "Please, don't." The room became unbearably quiet. One of the executives cleared his throat impatiently. "Mr. Jian," he said firmly, "your flight leaves in 3 hours. Thousands of people are waiting for your announcement. We cannot delay this ceremony." Jungkook remained motionless. His heartbeat pounded louder than the rain against the high glass windows. His gaze returned to Jimin, whose eyes silently begged him to remember something buried deep beneath years of forgotten memories. Something only the two of them knew. Something that had once seemed insignificant, but had quietly shaped every decision Jungkook had made since childhood. The scent of old wood carried him backward through time. 15 years earlier, they had stood beneath an enormous oak tree overlooking a quiet river in their small hometown. The afternoon sky had burned orange while cicadas sang endlessly in the summer heat. 12-year-old Jungkook clutched a worn notebook filled with songs he dreamed of performing on the world's greatest stages. Beside him, Jimin held a tiny glass jar containing dozens of glowing fireflies dancing like scattered stars. "Promise me something," Jimin had whispered with unusual seriousness. Jungkook laughed, assuming another childish game. "What kind of promise?" Jimin hesitated before answering. "If one day I disappear, don't chase your dream until you know why I left." Jungkook frowned. "That's ridiculous. Why would you disappear?" Jimin smiled, but sadness lingered inside his eyes. "Just promise." Without understanding, Jungkook extended his smallest finger. Jimin wrapped his around it. "I promise." Neither boy noticed the elderly woman watching them from the bridge nearby, her expression filled with quiet sorrow as if she already knew the promise would someday demand an impossible price. The memory shattered as thunder exploded outside the concert hall. Jungkook inhaled sharply. He had almost forgotten those words. Almost. "Jungkook," Jimin whispered again, his voice barely audible now. "You promised me." The executives exchanged confused glances. None of them understood why their celebrated prodigy suddenly looked like a frightened child instead of an accomplished musician. His manager stepped closer. "Ignore him," she said quietly. "Whatever this is, it can wait until after the ceremony." But Jungkook knew it could not wait. Not anymore. For years, strange events had followed every major success in his life. Anonymous letters with no sender. Mysterious phone calls that ended in silence. An old silver key appearing inside his apartment without explanation. Every time he came closer to achieving his dream, another piece of his forgotten past surfaced, always connected somehow to Jimin. He had convinced himself they were meaningless coincidences. Now he realized they had all been warnings. Jimin slowly walked toward the stage. Every footstep echoed through the hall with painful clarity. When he finally reached Jungkook, neither of them spoke for several long seconds. Their silence carried years of unspoken guilt. Jimin reached into the inner pocket of his rain-soaked coat and carefully removed a faded envelope sealed with dark blue wax. The edges were worn, as though it had been opened and closed countless times before. Across the front, Written in elegant handwriting were 6 simple words. Only after the final choice is made. Jungkook's breathing became uneven. He recognized the handwriting instantly. It belonged to his father, who had disappeared without explanation nearly 16 years earlier. His father had been declared dead after a devastating mountain accident, although no body had ever been found. Jungkook's fingers trembled as he accepted the envelope. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. Jimin lowered his eyes. "I've been keeping it for 15 years. Jungkook stared at him in disbelief. "Why?" Jimin swallowed hard before answering. "Because your father made me swear I wouldn't give it to you until the day you had to choose between your dream and your promise." Every person inside the concert hall fell silent again. Even those who knew nothing about the conversation sensed they had just witnessed the beginning of a truth that had been buried for decades. Jungkook slowly broke the wax seal. Inside rested a single folded letter and a weathered photograph. The picture showed 2 smiling boys beneath the same old oak tree. On the back, someone had written a sentence in faded ink. "Some dreams are meant to save the world. Others are meant to save one heart. Only one choice will let you keep both." Jungkook felt the ground disappear beneath him as memories he had buried for years began resurfacing one after another, revealing that the promise he had once considered childish had never been a game at all. It had been the beginning of a destiny neither he nor Jimin had ever been allowed to escape. Jungkook unfolded the letter with shaking hands, but before he could read the first sentence, an old, brittle key slipped from between the pages and landed on the polished wooden stage with a sharp metallic clang that echoed through the empty concert hall. Every eye instinctively followed it. The tiny object looked ordinary, yet the moment Jungkook saw the carved symbol engraved on its handle, his heartbeat became painfully uneven. It was the same symbol that had appeared on the anonymous envelopes, on the silver pendant his father had once worn every day, and on the weathered oak tree where he and Jimin had made their childhood promise. It had haunted his life for years like a silent ghost. He slowly bent down, picked up the key, and closed his fingers around it. The cold metal felt strangely warm, as if it had been waiting for him all along. His gaze returned to the letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. Every curve of every word belonged to the father whose voice had slowly faded from his memory, but whose absence had shaped every year of his life. "My dear Jungkook, if you are reading this, it means the moment I feared has finally arrived. You are standing before the greatest dream of your life, and Jimin has done exactly what I asked him to do. Before you judge him, remember that every lie he told you was meant to protect you, not deceive you." Jungkook stopped reading. His throat tightened. Across from him, Jimin stood perfectly still, refusing to meet his eyes. The silence between them became heavier than any argument they had ever had. Jungkook forced himself to continue. "When you were 8 years old, you almost died. You never knew because I chose to erase that day from your life. There was an accident near the river after the old bridge collapsed during the storm. I reached you too late. Another child reached you first. That child was Jimin." Jungkook's fingers tightened around the paper until it trembled. A strange pressure built inside his chest as fragments of forgotten images flickered through his mind. Rain, cold water, someone shouting his name, a small hand refusing to let go. He had always believed those flashes were meaningless dreams. Suddenly they felt terrifyingly real. "Jimin pulled you from the river, but in doing so, he lost something precious that he has hidden from everyone ever since. He begged me never to tell you because he feared you would give up everything out of guilt. I agreed, but only on one condition. If one day your greatest dream demanded that you leave him behind forever, he would have to reveal the truth. That day has finally come." Jungkook lowered the letter, his vision blurred. "What did you lose?" he whispered. Jimin remained silent. His shoulders rose and fell with slow, controlled breaths, but the effort of remaining calm was visible in every muscle of his face. Finally, he smiled, though the expression carried more sadness than comfort. "Not everything needs to stay buried forever." Without another word, he slowly reached behind his right ear and removed a small hearing device. The tiny electronic instrument rested quietly in his palm. Jungkook stared at it, unable to understand. Jimin looked directly into his eyes before speaking again, his voice softer than before. "I haven't been able to hear properly from my right ear since that day at the river." The words struck harder than any scream. Jungkook instinctively took a step backward. Countless memories crashed together inside his mind. Every time they had walked through crowded streets, Jimin had always positioned himself on Jungkook's left side. During conversations, he unconsciously tilted his head in the same direction. At concerts, he always asked sound engineers to stand slightly to one side. Jungkook had laughed about those habits for years without ever questioning them. They had never been habits. They had been adaptations to a wound carried in silence for 15 years. Tears slowly gathered in Jungkook's eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jimin gave a quiet laugh that barely concealed years of exhaustion. "Because I knew you." His smile faded. "The moment you found out, you would have abandoned every dream you ever had. I couldn't let that happen." Jungkook looked again at the unsigned contract lying on the table. Just minutes earlier, it had represented everything he had worked toward. Now it seemed strangely distant, almost meaningless. "You sacrificed your hearing." His voice broke before he could finish. Jimin gently shook his head. "I didn't sacrifice it for your dream. I saved my best friend." Those words shattered the last wall protecting Jungkook's emotions. Tears rolled freely down his face as memories long buried finally returned in vivid fragments. He saw the swollen river consuming the broken bridge. He remembered slipping beneath the freezing current. He remembered panic filling his lungs. Then he saw another child diving into the violent water without hesitation, tiny hands pulling him upward. A deafening explosion as a massive tree branch crashed into the river. After that, only darkness. Jungkook suddenly remembered waking in a hospital weeks later, believing he had simply fallen while hiking with his father. The doctors had never mentioned the river. His father had never mentioned Jimin. The entire truth had been carefully hidden behind comforting lies. Jungkook looked toward the audience seats where his manager and the executives waited impatiently. They could not possibly understand why the most important business meeting of his life had become meaningless in a matter of minutes. One executive finally stood and spoke firmly. "Mr. Jian, we respect your personal matters, but this contract cannot remain unsigned forever." Jungkook slowly turned toward him. For the first time since entering the hall, absolute peace settled across his face. He carefully folded his father's letter, placed it back inside the envelope, and laid the golden fountain pen on top of the untouched contract. "Some opportunities only come once," the executive warned. Jungkook nodded gently. "I know." He looked toward Jimin, whose eyes widened with growing concern. "That's exactly why I won't waste mine." Without another word, Jungkook walked away from the signing table and stopped beside Jimin. He placed one hand on his friend's shoulder, not as someone carrying guilt, but as someone finally understanding what true gratitude felt like. Together, they walked toward the enormous exit doors of the concert hall while dozens of stunned employees watched in complete silence. Behind them, the unsigned contract remained under the bright stage lights, symbolizing the greatest dream Jungkook had ever chosen to leave behind. Outside, the rain had finally begun to slow. Cool air carried the scent of wet earth and blooming pine trees through the city streets. For the first time in years, neither of them hurried toward an uncertain future. They simply walked side by side, unaware that the old key resting inside Jungkook's pocket was about to unlock a secret far greater than either of them had imagined. A secret that would redefine not only their past, but also the reason Jungkook's father had disappeared all those years ago. The rain had almost stopped when Jungkook and Jimin reached the deserted street outside the concert hall, but the silence between them felt louder than the storm they had just left behind. Neon lights reflected across the wet pavement, painting the city in shimmering shades of blue and gold. Cars splashed through puddles in the distance, yet neither of them noticed. Jungkook's fingers remained tightly wrapped around the old key inside his coat pocket, as though letting go of it would allow the truth to disappear again. He finally broke the silence. "How many more secrets are you carrying?" His voice was calm, but beneath it lay years of confusion, regret, and quiet anger. Jimin lowered his eyes. "Enough to make you hate me." Jungkook stopped walking. "I could never hate you." Jimin smiled faintly, though sadness lingered behind the expression. "You say that because you still don't know everything." A cold breeze swept through the empty street, carrying the scent of rain-soaked leaves. Jungkook searched Jimin's face, realizing how much he had overlooked over the years. The quiet smiles that often hid exhaustion. The habit of changing the subject whenever childhood memories surfaced. The countless moments when Jimin had quietly disappeared without explanation after receiving mysterious phone calls. None of it had seemed important before. Now every forgotten detail demanded an answer. Jimin slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded map so old that its edges had turned yellow with age. Carefully unfolding it, he revealed a hand-drawn route leading deep into the mountains outside their hometown. At the center of the map was the same symbol engraved on the old key. "Your father drew this," Jimin said softly. "He told me to keep it hidden until the day you chose people over ambition." Jungkook looked at the map, then at the key in his hand. "Where does it lead?" Jimin hesitated. "To a place that officially doesn't exist anymore." Jungkook frowned. "What does that mean?" Jimin inhaled deeply before answering. "An abandoned observatory built nearly 70 years ago. Everyone believes it was destroyed by a landslide." He looked directly into Jungkook's eyes. "It wasn't." Before Jungkook could respond, his phone suddenly vibrated inside his pocket. The screen displayed an unfamiliar number. He almost ignored it, but something compelled him to answer. "Hello." Only silence greeted him at first. Then an elderly man's voice emerged through layers of static. "If you already have the key, don't trust anyone who tells you the observatory was abandoned." Jungkook's heartbeat accelerated. "Who are you?" The voice continued as if it hadn't heard the question. "Your father didn't disappear because of an accident." A burst of interference crackled through the speaker. "He disappeared because someone wanted what he protected." Jungkook's grip tightened around the phone. "Tell me where he is." But the line abruptly went dead. He stared at the black screen in disbelief. Jimin had gone pale. "Who was that?" Jungkook slowly lowered the phone. "He said my father never died." Jimin closed his eyes for a brief moment as though the words confirmed a fear he had carried for years. "Then we don't have much time." "Time for what?" "Before the people searching for that key realize you've chosen not to leave the country." Jungkook's expression hardened. "You've known someone was watching me." Jimin nodded reluctantly. "Since the day we made our promise." The words landed with chilling weight. Jungkook remembered the old woman standing on the bridge all those years ago, watching them from a distance. At the time she had seemed like an ordinary passerby. Now he wondered whether she had been something else entirely. "You never told me because you thought it would keep me safe." Jimin gave a weary nod. "Every anonymous letter you received, every strange package, every unexplained coincidence. I intercepted dozens more before they reached you." Jungkook stared at him in stunned silence. "You spent 15 years protecting me without saying a word." Jimin looked away. "It was easier than watching you lose your future because of me." They resumed walking, this time toward the city's quiet train station. Above them, clouds slowly drifted apart, revealing a sky filled with brilliant stars. For a brief moment, everything seemed peaceful again. Then the sound of screeching tires shattered the calm. A black SUV sped around the corner and stopped violently across the street, blocking their path. 4 people dressed in dark coats stepped out with unsettling precision. Their movements were calm, disciplined, almost military. None of them carried visible weapons, yet something about their presence radiated danger. The tallest among them removed a pair of black leather gloves and spoke in a measured voice. "Mr. Jian." Jungkook instinctively moved in front of Jimin. "Who are you?" The stranger ignored the question. His eyes settled on Jungkook's coat pocket. "The key belongs to us." Jimin's expression immediately changed. The fear Jungkook had seen earlier inside the concert hall returned stronger than ever. He whispered without taking his eyes off the strangers. "Don't let them see the map." Jungkook quietly folded it and slipped it inside his jacket. The leader smiled. "Wise decision." His voice remained unnervingly polite. "Hand over the key and neither of you will be harmed." Jungkook slowly shook his head. "I don't even know what it unlocks." "Exactly," the man replied. "Which is why you should never open it." A tense silence settled over the street. The city noises seemed to disappear entirely. Even the wind had fallen still. Jungkook glanced toward Jimin, who subtly shook his head. It was enough. Jungkook took one slow step backward. The strangers immediately noticed. The leader sighed almost regretfully. "I was hoping this wouldn't become difficult." In one swift motion, the 4 figures advanced. Jungkook grabbed Jimin's wrist, and together they sprinted down the rain-slick street, their footsteps echoing between the towering buildings as the city transformed into a maze of shadows. They ran without looking back, driven not only by fear, but by a growing certainty that Jungkook's greatest dream had never been the real destination of his life. The promise he had made beneath the old oak tree all those years ago had always been leading them toward this forgotten path, where every answer about his father, the mysterious key, and the hidden observatory was waiting to be uncovered. Their footsteps pounded against the rain-slick pavement as they disappeared into a maze of narrow alleyways, where flickering streetlights cast long, trembling shadows across cracked brick walls. Jungkook could hear the men behind them, not shouting, not panicking, but running with terrifying discipline, their synchronized footsteps sounding more like a single relentless force than four separate people. The city around them blurred into streaks of neon and silver as cold air burned inside Jungkook's lungs. Jimin's breathing had become uneven, yet he refused to slow down. "This way," Jimin whispered, pulling Jungkook toward a rusted iron staircase that climbed the back of an abandoned warehouse. The metal groaned beneath their weight as they rushed upward. Rainwater dripped from the corroded railings, splashing onto the concrete below. From the rooftop, the city stretched endlessly beneath a blanket of mist, its skyline glowing like distant stars trapped beneath clouds. Jungkook turned toward the stairwell, just as the first of the strangers emerged onto the roof. The man stopped only a few meters away. He did not attack. Instead, he calmly raised both empty hands. "You don't understand what you're protecting," he said quietly. Jungkook remained between the stranger and Jimin. "Then explain it." The man looked directly at the old key, protruding slightly from Jungkook's coat pocket. "That key doesn't open a treasure. It opens evidence." Jungkook frowned. "Evidence of what?" The stranger hesitated. "Evidence powerful enough to destroy people who have spent decades rewriting history." Before another word could be spoken, a sharp voice echoed from the opposite side of the rooftop. "Enough." 3 more figures appeared, surrounding them from different directions. Unlike the first man, these newcomers carried no trace of patience in their expressions. The oldest among them stepped forward. His gray hair was neatly combed despite the rain, and his tailored black coat looked almost untouched by the weather. His calm smile unsettled Jungkook more than any weapon could have. "Mr. Jian," he said politely, "you've inherited your father's curiosity." Jungkook stared at him. "You knew my father." The man's smile widened. "Oh, much better than you can imagine." Jimin suddenly grabbed Jungkook's sleeve. "We have to leave." His voice had dropped into barely more than a whisper. "Now?" Jungkook looked at him in confusion. "You know him?" Jimin's face lost all color. "I've seen him before." "Where?" "At your father's funeral." Those words struck Jungkook like ice. The funeral. A ceremony where no body had ever been buried. Only an empty coffin. Only unanswered questions. The elderly stranger slowly removed a pair of thin leather gloves. "You remember me now, don't you, Jimin?" Jimin remained silent. "You were very brave for a child." The old man's eyes shifted toward Jungkook. "He almost ruined everything." Jungkook's fists clenched. "What did he do?" The man chuckled softly. "He refused to forget." A cold silence settled across the rooftop. Jungkook felt something inside him beginning to connect. The erased memories. The hidden letters. The mysterious key. The fake funeral. The anonymous warnings. None of them had been isolated events. They were pieces of the same carefully buried story. "You've been watching us our entire lives," Jungkook said. The man nodded without shame. "Of course." "Why?" "Because your father stole something that never belonged to him." Jungkook instinctively touched the key again. "This?" "No." The old man smiled. "You." For several seconds, nobody moved. Only the sound of rain striking the rooftop filled the silence. Jungkook felt the world tilt beneath him. "What does that mean?" The elderly stranger slowly reached inside his coat. Jungkook instinctively prepared to defend himself. Instead of a weapon, the man produced an old photograph sealed inside a transparent envelope. He tossed it across the rooftop. It slid through the rainwater until stopping at Jungkook's feet. Jungkook picked it up. The photograph showed his father standing beside 3 unfamiliar people in front of the mountain observatory shown on the map. One of those 3 people was unmistakably the elderly man now standing before him. Another was a smiling woman Jungkook had never seen. The fourth, his breath caught. It was a little boy, no older than 6, standing between them. The boy looked exactly like Jungkook, except on the back of the photograph, written in his father's unmistakable handwriting, were 7 words. The child must never know his origin. Jungkook's hands began trembling uncontrollably. What origin? The elderly man's expression softened almost sympathetically. Your father loved you. He paused. So he lied. Jungkook stared at him. Lied about what? The answer came quietly. Everything. Lightning exploded across the sky. For a fraction of a second, the rooftop became blindingly white. Jimin suddenly stepped in front of Jungkook. Don't listen to him. The elderly man sighed. Still protecting him. I made a promise. And that promise is precisely why he's standing here instead of living the life he deserved. Jimin's eyes filled with pain. I would make the same choice again. The old man's gaze lingered on Jimin before returning to Jungkook. Ask him. Jungkook looked at Jimin. Ask him where he disappeared every year on the anniversary of the river accident. Jimin remained silent. Ask him why he always carried that silver compass your father gave him. Still no answer. Ask him why your father trusted him more than anyone else. Jungkook slowly turned toward his friend. His voice barely rose above a whisper. Jimin. Jimin closed his eyes. When he finally spoke, every word carried the weight of 15 years. Because your father knew he wasn't coming back. Jungkook's heartbeat stopped. He told me, Jimin continued, struggling to control his voice, that if he failed, I had to become the person who would quietly keep your life together. Tears gathered in his eyes. I wasn't protecting a promise. He looked directly at Jungkook. I was protecting the last wish your father ever gave me. The confession hung in the rain-filled air. For the first time since this journey had begun, Jungkook understood that Jimin had never simply been his childhood friend. He had been carrying the responsibility of an entire lifetime in complete silence, sacrificing pieces of his own happiness year after year so that Jungkook could continue believing his future belonged only to himself. And now, standing on that abandoned rooftop with the mysterious key still hidden inside his pocket, Jungkook realized that every sacrifice, his abandoned dream, Jimin's hidden pain, and his father's disappearance, had been leading toward a single truth waiting somewhere beyond the Forgotten Mountain Observatory, where the answers had remained untouched by time for nearly 2 decades. The old photograph remained trembling in Jungkook's hands as the rain slowly softened into a fine mist, each drop glistening beneath the pale rooftop lights like scattered fragments of forgotten memories. His eyes refused to leave the words written on the back, asterisk the child must never know his origin. They echoed inside his mind again and again until everything else became distant. The city, the strangers, even the cold wind seemed to disappear beneath the unbearable weight of that single sentence. What origin? Jungkook asked once more, his voice almost breaking. What did my father hide from me? The elderly man looked toward the mountains stretching beyond the sleeping city. The truth has been buried there for 19 years. Jungkook took a slow step forward. Then tell me now. I can't. Or you won't. The old man's eyes darkened with quiet regret. If I tell you here, none of us will leave this rooftop alive. The words were spoken without drama, yet they carried enough certainty to freeze everyone in place. Jimin instinctively glanced toward the surrounding buildings. For the first time that night, he noticed something disturbing. Tiny red lights, one after another, blinking faintly across distant rooftops. His breathing stopped. Jungkook. Jungkook turned. What is it? Jimin slowly pointed toward the neighboring buildings. There. Jungkook followed his gaze. At first, he saw nothing. Then another tiny crimson light appeared, Then another. And another. Dozens. Perfectly still. Watching. The elderly stranger quietly closed his eyes. They found us sooner than I expected. One of the younger men, beside him, whispered urgently. We have less than 2 minutes. Jungkook frowned. Who found us? The old man answered without hesitation. The people who erased your father. A sudden, distant crack echoed through the night. Not thunder. Something sharper. More deliberate. A fraction of a second later, the rooftop water tank behind them exploded, sending thousands of gallons of icy water crashing across the concrete. Everyone instinctively scattered. Jungkook grabbed Jimin's arm just as another deafening impact shattered a ventilation tower nearby. Metal screamed against concrete. Rainwater mixed with flying debris. The rooftop instantly descended into chaos. They're shooting, one of the strangers shouted. The elderly man immediately pushed Jungkook behind a large concrete pillar. Stay down. Jungkook's heart pounded violently. I thought you were chasing us. We were trying to reach you first. Another impact ripped through the rooftop, showering everyone with broken concrete. The realization struck Jungkook harder than the explosions around him. The 4 strangers had never intended to kill him. They had been trying to protect him. Everything he had believed during the chase had been wrong. Jimin looked toward the opposite building. I can't see them. You won't, the old man replied. They never let themselves be seen. The city skyline suddenly went dark. One building after another lost power, until nearly the entire district disappeared into darkness. Only emergency lights remained glowing faintly beneath the rain-filled sky. Jungkook felt his pulse racing. This wasn't random. No. The old man's expression hardened. They've decided you're no longer supposed to exist. Before Jungkook could respond, a powerful engine roared somewhere below. Bright headlights burst into the alley beside the warehouse. A large black van skidded to a stop. The side door flew open. A young woman stepped out. She looked no older than 30. Her dark coat whipped wildly in the wind. Without hesitation, she shouted toward the rooftop. Mr. Han. The elderly man immediately looked over the edge. You made it. Barely. She held up a small tablet, displaying a rapidly moving satellite map. They've surrounded 3 blocks already. Jimin looked at the screen. There are that many. She nodded grimly. More than 50. Jungkook stared in disbelief. 50 people are chasing one key. The woman looked directly into his eyes. They're not chasing the key. They're chasing what's locked behind it. The old man hurried toward Jungkook. We have to leave now. He reached into his pocket and removed another folded letter. Unlike the first, this envelope was completely unmarked. He pressed it into Jungkook's hand. Don't open it until you reach the observatory. Jungkook looked down. Another letter from my father. The old man nodded. He wrote 3. You already read the first. Jimin kept the second. He gently closed Jungkook's fingers around the third. This one explains why he chose you. Jungkook's voice became almost inaudible. Chose me for what? The old man hesitated. For something much larger than either of us. Another violent explosion shook the rooftop. Concrete cracked beneath their feet. The entire structure groaned. We're out of time, the young woman shouted. The old man turned toward Jimin. Do you still have it? Without speaking, Jimin reached beneath his shirt and pulled out a thin silver chain. Attached to it hung a weathered compass. Its glass was scratched. Its needle spun wildly instead of pointing north. Jungkook immediately recognized it. His father's compass. The one he remembered playing with as a child. I thought it disappeared. Jimin smiled sadly. Your father gave it to me the night before he vanished. The elderly man carefully took the compass. Then, to Jungkook's astonishment, he placed the old key into a narrow slot hidden beneath it. A soft metallic click echoed through the rooftop. The spinning needle stopped instantly. Instead of pointing north, it pointed directly toward the distant mountains, toward the forgotten observatory, toward the place where every secret seemed to begin. Jungkook stared in amazement. It was never just a compass. The old man nodded. It's a guide. A guide to what? The answer came quietly. Your father's final message. For several long seconds, nobody moved. The compass glowed faintly beneath the rain, its silver surface reflecting the distant flashes of lightning. Jungkook realized his father had never left random clues. Every object, every promise, every sacrifice, every lie had been carefully arranged like pieces of an enormous puzzle meant for one person alone. Him. The old man gently returned the compass to Jimin. Protect him until the truth is complete. Jimin answered without hesitation. I always have. The elderly man smiled for the first time. I know. A loud rumble suddenly echoed beneath the rooftop. The concrete floor lurched violently. The warehouse had begun collapsing after the repeated attacks. Steel beams twisted with deafening screams. Dust burst upward through widening cracks. The young woman below shouted desperately. Jump! Without another second to waste, Jimin grabbed Jungkook's wrist. Together, they sprinted across the trembling rooftop toward the edge. Behind them, the elderly man and the others remained where they stood, holding their positions as the collapsing structure separated them. Jungkook looked back one final time. The old man raised a hand in silent farewell. Then a wall of dust swallowed him completely. Jungkook and Jimin leaped from the collapsing rooftop toward the van below, carrying the ancient key, the mysterious compass, and the unopened final letter, unaware that deep within the mountains, someone had already activated a mechanism hidden inside the abandoned observatory, beginning a countdown that had remained dormant for 19 years, and signaling that Jungkook had finally started the journey his father had prepared long before disappearing from the world. The van hit the highway at full speed just as the abandoned warehouse disappeared behind a cloud of dust and twisted steel. Rain streaked across the windshield while the engine roared through the sleeping city, weaving between empty streets with practiced precision. Inside, no one spoke for several minutes. The only sounds were the rhythmic sweep of the windshield wipers, Jungkook's uneven breathing, and the faint metallic ticking of the old compass resting in Jimin's hands. Jungkook looked through the rear window. The warehouse was gone. Nothing remained except flashing emergency lights reflecting against the wet pavement. His thoughts returned to the elderly man. Do you think he survived? The young woman behind the wheel kept her eyes on the road. If Mr. Han wanted to survive, he survived. And if he didn't? She remained silent. Jimin finally answered. He has spent most of his life preparing for tonight. Jungkook turned toward him. You trusted him. I trusted your father. That's not the same thing. Jimin nodded slowly. No, it isn't. Silence settled again. Jungkook reached into his coat and carefully removed the unopened envelope. His father's handwriting looked almost alive beneath the dim interior light. His fingers instinctively moved toward the seal. Don't. Jimin's voice was calm but firm. Jungkook looked up. He said to wait until the observatory. I know. But what if we're too late? Jimin gently shook his head. Your father never left instructions without a reason. Jungkook reluctantly slipped the envelope back inside his pocket. The compass suddenly gave a soft metallic vibration. Everyone noticed. The young woman glanced into the rearview mirror. It moved. Jimin looked down. The needle, which had pointed steadily toward the mountains moments earlier, had begun turning by itself. slowly, deliberately. Then it stopped, pointing away from the mountains, toward an old road branching east. The young woman frowned. That's impossible. Jimin's expression tightened. No. It means someone changed the route. Jungkook stared at the compass. Changed it. The observatory isn't giving directions anymore. It's calling us somewhere else. The young woman immediately turned the steering wheel. The van left the highway and entered a narrow road surrounded by towering pine forests. Streetlights disappeared. Darkness swallowed everything except the twin beams of the headlights cutting through drifting fog. The deeper they drove, the quieter the world became. Even the rain had stopped. Only the whisper of wind through ancient trees accompanied them. After nearly 40 minutes, the road ended before an enormous rusted gate, almost completely hidden beneath vines. Above it stood a weathered stone arch, engraved with the same symbol carved into the key. Jungkook stepped out first. Cold mountain air filled his lungs. The forest smelled of damp earth, pine resin, and forgotten seasons. Beyond the gate stretched an overgrown pathway, disappearing into darkness. This place, Jungkook whispered. It feels familiar. Jimin looked at him carefully. You've been here before. Jungkook frowned. I haven't. You just don't remember. The young woman unlocked the gate with surprising ease. Its hinges cried out after years of silence. Beyond the entrance, moss-covered lanterns lined the path like forgotten guardians. None of them had electricity. Yet one after another. They began glowing. Soft golden light spread through the forest without flames or visible wires. Jungkook stopped walking. Did you do that? The young woman slowly shook her head. No. Jimin looked toward the compass. Its needle had become perfectly still. We've arrived. The pathway curved gently around massive cedar trees before opening into a small clearing. At its center stood an old wooden cabin. Time had faded its walls to silver gray. Its windows were dark. Its roof sagged beneath years of snow and rain. Yet the front door stood slightly open, as though someone had left only moments earlier. Jungkook approached cautiously. His heartbeat echoed inside his ears. The air around the cabin carried an unmistakable scent. Fresh coffee. He froze. My father. Jimin looked at him. What is it? He always roasted coffee before writing music. Jimin's face slowly lost color. That smell shouldn't exist anymore. The cabin had supposedly been abandoned for 19 years. Yet warm coffee drifted from inside. Jungkook pushed the door open. The hinges barely made a sound. Dust covered most of the furniture. Old books filled wooden shelves from floor to ceiling. A stone fireplace rested cold against the far wall. Nothing appeared unusual, until Jungkook noticed the steaming ceramic cup sitting alone on a small table beside the window. Steam still curled gently into the air. Someone had poured it only minutes earlier. His pulse quickened. Hello? No answer. He stepped farther inside. The wooden floor creaked beneath his boots. Every object looked frozen in time. An old piano. Stacks of handwritten music. A faded wool blanket folded neatly across an armchair. A pair of reading glasses resting atop an open notebook. Everything looked as though its owner had simply stepped outside for a short walk. Jungkook slowly approached the notebook. The final page remained unfinished. The ink was dry. The handwriting belonged unmistakably to his father. If you're reading this. The sentence ended there. Nothing more. Jungkook gently touched the page. The paper felt strangely warm, almost as though another hand had rested there moments earlier. Suddenly, tick, tick, tick. A faint mechanical sound echoed somewhere beneath the cabin. Everyone froze. The young woman immediately looked toward the floorboards. "Did you hear that?" Jimin nodded. "It came from underneath us." The ticking grew louder. Slow. Steady. Precise. Jungkook looked down. One loose wooden plank vibrated almost imperceptibly with each tick. He knelt beside it. The old key inside his pocket suddenly became warm. Then hotter. Almost burning against his palm. Without fully understanding why, he removed it. The carved symbol began emitting a faint blue glow. The compass answered with a soft vibration. The two objects seemed drawn toward the loose floorboard. Jimin knelt beside him. "There's something underneath." Jungkook carefully pried the plank upward. Dust rose into the air. Hidden beneath was an iron hatch no larger than a suitcase. At its center rested a keyhole, perfectly matching the ancient key. Jungkook looked at Jimin. Neither of them spoke. The years of unanswered questions. The sacrifices. The promises. The abandoned dreams. Everything had led to this forgotten hatch hidden beneath an isolated mountain cabin. With one slow breath, Jungkook inserted the key into the lock. The mechanism resisted for a brief second before turning with a deep metallic click that echoed beneath the floor like the awakening of something that had slept for nearly 2 decades. A low rumble spread through the cabin as hidden gears began moving below them. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The fireplace quietly slid aside, revealing a narrow stone staircase descending into darkness, where a warm golden light pulsed from somewhere far below, carrying with it the unmistakable sound of a familiar melody, one that Jungkook suddenly realized he had been humming unconsciously since childhood, despite never remembering where he had first heard it. The melody floating up from beneath the cabin froze Jungkook where he stood. It was soft, almost like a lullaby carried by the mountain air, yet every note struck a forgotten corner of his heart. Without realizing it, he began humming along. His voice blended perfectly with the music rising from the hidden staircase. Jimin stared at him in disbelief. "You remember it." Jungkook slowly stopped singing. "I've never heard that song before." Jimin's eyes shimmered. "You've been humming it since we were children." Jungkook frowned. "I thought I made it up." "No." Jimin swallowed hard. "Your father used to sing it every evening." The realization settled over Jungkook like a wave. A memory surfaced, not complete but vivid enough to steal his breath. A warm fireplace. A pair of strong hands, gently lifting him onto someone's shoulders. A man laughing. The same melody filling a quiet wooden cabin while snow drifted beyond the windows. Then darkness. The memory vanished before he could reach it. Jungkook closed his eyes. I almost remembered his face. Jimin rested a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You will." The young woman picked up an old lantern hanging beside the staircase. Although no flame burned inside it, the glass suddenly glowed with a gentle amber light the moment she touched the handle. She looked toward Jungkook. "Ready?" He nodded. Together, they descended. The stone steps spiraled deep beneath the mountain. The air became warmer with every step, carrying the scent of cedar wood, old paper, and machine oil. The rhythmic ticking they had heard above grew louder. Tick, tick, tick. It echoed through the passage with almost perfect precision. The staircase finally opened into an enormous underground chamber. Jungkook stopped breathing. It was unlike anything he had imagined. The cavern stretched hundreds of meters beneath the mountain. Ancient stone walls surrounded an astonishing workshop that seemed untouched by time. Massive shelves overflowed with leather-bound journals. Hundreds of carefully labeled wooden boxes filled the room. Maps covered entire walls. Mechanical devices of impossible complexity rested upon long work tables. At the center stood a gigantic clockwork mechanism extending from floor to ceiling. Thousands of polished brass gears rotated together with breathtaking precision. The ticking came from its enormous heart. Above the machine, carved into white marble, were words that made Jungkook's pulse quicken. Truth survives only when someone chooses sacrifice over ambition. Jimin looked upward silently. He built all this. The young woman slowly nodded. Your father designed every part himself. Jungkook walked closer to the machine. Its gears reflected golden light across the chamber. It felt alive. Not because of magic. Because every movement had been engineered with extraordinary care. His fingers brushed against one polished gear. Instantly, click, the mechanism paused. A soft chime echoed throughout the cavern. One bookshelf slowly slid aside. Behind it appeared another room. Inside stood dozens of recording devices, old film reels, photographs, and carefully organized archives. In the center rested a wooden desk. Upon it sat a vintage tape recorder. Its reels began turning by themselves. Static filled the chamber. Then, a familiar voice emerged. Calm, warm, gentle. Hello, Jungkook. The world disappeared. Jungkook's knees weakened. His father. It was unmistakably his father. If you're hearing this. The recording paused briefly. Then you chose exactly as I prayed you would. Tears immediately filled Jungkook's eyes. I wanted to meet you again. His father laughed softly through the speaker. I know. You probably have more questions than answers. Another pause. I wish I could tell you everything in person. Jungkook unconsciously stepped closer. His father's voice continued. When you were little, you asked me what courage meant. A faint chuckle echoed. I told you courage was never about being fearless. It was about choosing kindness when fear gave you every excuse not to. Jungkook remembered. The memory arrived completely. He had been 5 years old, sitting beside a fireplace, holding a wooden toy airplane. His father had smiled while saying those exact words. Jungkook covered his mouth. The forgotten memory returned with painful clarity. His father continued. If you've reached this room, then you've already done something far greater than achieving your dream. You kept your promise. Jimin quietly looked away. His eyes had become red with emotion. The recording went on. I know what you gave up. And I know Jimin tried to stop you. A soft sigh escaped the speakers. He has blamed himself for too many years. Jungkook slowly turned toward Jimin. His father continued speaking before either of them could move. None of this was ever Jimin's fault. He wanted to tell you the truth countless times. I was the one who forbade him. Jimin lowered his head. For years, he had silently accepted Jungkook's confusion, anger, and disappointment without defending himself. Now, for the first time, the burden was finally lifted. The tape recorder clicked gently before the next section began. There is one final truth you must understand. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the giant mechanism seemed to slow. I did not disappear because I failed. I disappeared because I succeeded. Jungkook's heartbeat accelerated. Succeeded. In this archive lies proof that powerful people spent decades stealing scientific discoveries, destroying evidence, and erasing everyone who refused to cooperate. They believed hiding the truth would give them control. I chose to hide the truth instead, so the right person could reveal it. The young woman's expression became solemn. So that's what this place really is. Jungkook stared at the endless shelves surrounding them. Every journal, every photograph, every recording, every document, an entire lifetime of evidence. His father continued. That evidence was never meant for me. It was always meant for you. Jungkook whispered almost inaudibly. Why me? The answer arrived with heartbreaking simplicity. Because unlike me, You know how to choose people before success. Jungkook closed his eyes. The contract, the dream, the applause, the career he had abandoned. For the first time, he understood. His father had never wanted him to become famous. He had wanted him to become someone capable of making the impossible choice. Someone willing to lose everything for what truly mattered. The tape recorder gave one final soft click. I am proud of you, my son. Silence followed. No further words came. Only the quiet turning of the enormous clockwork machine. Jungkook remained motionless, tears falling freely onto the dusty wooden floor. Jimin slowly stepped beside him. Neither of them spoke. Words had become unnecessary. For years, they had believed the old promise beneath the oak tree had been a burden. Now they finally understood it had been a gift, one carefully prepared by a father who had trusted love, loyalty, and sacrifice more than power or recognition. As the great mechanism continued turning beneath the mountain, hidden locks throughout the vast archive began unlocking one after another with gentle metallic clicks, revealing countless sealed cabinets that had remained closed for 19 years, while somewhere deep within the observatory above them, a single light that had not shone since the night of Jungkook's father's disappearance quietly illuminated the darkness once again, welcoming the beginning of a new chapter in both of their lives. The gentle metallic clicks continued echoing through the underground archive long after the tape recorder fell silent. One by one, sealed cabinets unlocked themselves with perfect mechanical precision, as though the entire mountain had been waiting for Jungkook's arrival before allowing its secrets to breathe again. Dust floated through the warm golden light, transforming the enormous chamber into something that felt suspended between memory and time itself. Jungkook remained standing before the tape recorder. His father's final words still echoed inside him. I am proud of you, my son. No applause he had ever received. No award he had ever imagined. No dream he had ever chased could compare to hearing those 6 simple words. He slowly wiped the tears from his face before turning toward the endless rows of shelves surrounding them. There must be thousands of documents. The young woman nodded. More than 40,000. Jungkook looked at her in disbelief. My father collected all of this alone. Not alone. She smiled faintly. There were 12 people. Jimin frowned. 12. The woman lowered her eyes. Only 3 are still alive. Silence filled the chamber once again. Jungkook understood immediately. The archive had not simply been hidden. It had been protected, paid for, preserved, with lives. He walked toward the nearest cabinet. Its heavy steel door stood slightly open after the locking mechanism released. Inside rested dozens of leather folders arranged by year. The earliest one was dated 24 years earlier. The latest stopped exactly 19 years ago, the year his father disappeared. Jungkook gently opened the final folder. Instead of reports or photographs, a single handwritten journal lay inside. Across its worn cover were the words, For Jungkook, only when you are ready. He opened the first page. If you are reading this, then I have already failed to come home. His breathing became uneven. Do not waste your life searching for me. If destiny is kind, the truth will eventually find you instead. Jungkook slowly turned another page. Each entry described not scientific discoveries, but ordinary moments. The first time, Jungkook learned to ride a bicycle. His first school recital. The afternoon, he cried after losing a drawing competition. The evening, he secretly left half of his birthday cake outside because he thought lonely birds deserved to celebrate too. Every memory, every tiny event. His father had somehow known about all of them. Jungkook's hands trembled. He was watching. Jimin quietly nodded. He never truly left. You knew. Jimin hesitated. I suspected. You never told me. I had no proof. Jungkook looked back at the journal. His father's handwriting became shakier in the later pages. Today I watched you graduate from elementary school. You looked for me in the crowd. I'm sorry I wasn't allowed to wave. Jungkook covered his eyes. A forgotten memory suddenly surfaced. A tall man standing beneath an umbrella across the street after the ceremony. His face had been hidden. Jungkook had smiled politely at the stranger before being pulled away by relatives. He had never known. It had been his father. The journal continued. You smiled today. That was enough to keep me alive a little longer. Tears rolled freely down Jungkook's face. Jimin quietly stepped away, giving him space. The young woman respectfully lowered her head. No one interrupted. After several minutes, Jungkook carefully closed the journal. He looked around the archive once more. This isn't just evidence. The young woman smiled. No. It's a father's life. She nodded. He preserved the world's truth, while secretly recording yours. Jungkook slowly laughed through his tears. He remembered things I forgot. Before anyone could answer, a deep mechanical vibration spread beneath the floor. The gigantic clockwork machine at the center of the chamber accelerated. Its thousands of brass gears began rotating faster than before. A low humming sound filled the cavern. Jimin immediately looked toward the mechanism. That's new. The young woman frowned. It shouldn't activate by itself. The humming intensified. Golden lights hidden throughout the chamber suddenly illuminated. Ancient projectors, mounted beneath the ceiling, slowly descended. Then, images appeared across the stone walls. Old films, silent recordings, photographs. Dozens of moving projections surrounded them. Jungkook watched in astonishment. There he was, a toddler laughing while chasing butterflies. His father filming from a distance. Another recording. Jungkook practicing piano alone at 13. Someone secretly watching through a nearby window. Another. His first public performance. Again. His father had been there. Always hidden. Always protecting. Always choosing distance instead of risking his son's safety. Jungkook's voice trembled. He missed nothing. The projections continued changing. Then suddenly, they stopped. The next image made everyone freeze. It showed Jungkook's father. Not hiding. Not running. He stood inside this very archive. Older. More tired. Looking directly into the camera. Unlike the tape recording, this was a video. He smiled gently. If you're seeing this, then the archive has decided you are ready. Jungkook instinctively stepped closer. His father's eyes seemed almost alive. There is one final place beneath this mountain. Jimin exchanged a glance with the young woman. Another room. His father nodded within the recording, as though answering. It cannot be opened with a key. It cannot be opened with a compass. It opens only after forgiveness. Jungkook frowned. Forgiveness. His father continued. For years you have searched for answers. But before the mountain gives them to you, you must first forgive the person standing closest to you. The chamber fell completely silent. Jungkook slowly turned. Only one person stood closest. Jimin. Jimin lowered his head. I never expected him to include this. Jungkook stared at his oldest friend. Years of unanswered questions. Years of hidden truths. Years of loneliness. Years of sacrifice. He remembered every misunderstanding. Every moment he had silently blamed Jimin for disappearing. Every birthday Jimin had missed. Every strange lie. Every unanswered phone call. Now every one of those memories carried a different meaning. Jimin quietly spoke before Jungkook could. I'm sorry. Jungkook looked at him. I couldn't tell you. I wanted to. I almost did, so many times. His voice broke. But every promise I made was to protect the only family your father had left. The room became still. The great machine slowed once more. Waiting. Jungkook walked toward him. Neither hurried. Neither spoke again. When they finally stood face to face, Jungkook looked into Jimin's tired eyes and saw not betrayal, but 19 years of silent loyalty. Without hesitation, he pulled Jimin into a tight embrace. I forgive you. Jimin's shoulders immediately began shaking. So do I, Jungkook whispered. I'm sorry I made you carry all of this alone. The moment those words left his lips, the entire underground archive trembled. A deep, resonant tone echoed through the mountain. The enormous clockwork machine stopped completely. Absolute silence followed. Then, somewhere beyond the farthest wall of the archive, hidden mechanisms untouched for nearly 2 decades awakened together. Ancient stone shifted. Massive gears turned. A concealed doorway slowly emerged from the mountain itself, revealing a narrow corridor bathed in warm white light, as though the mountain had accepted Jungkook's choice. Not because he possessed the key, nor because he had discovered the truth, but because he had finally chosen forgiveness over resentment, just as his father had hoped he would. The hidden doorway finished opening with a deep, resonant rumble that echoed through every corner of the underground archive. A soft white light spilled into the chamber, illuminating the ancient stone floor with an almost ethereal glow. Unlike the warm golden light of the archive, this radiance felt peaceful, untouched by time, as though it belonged to another world entirely. No one moved. Even the enormous clockwork machine remained perfectly still, its thousands of brass gears frozen in silent reverence. Jungkook slowly released Jimin from the embrace. The weight that had burdened both of them for nearly 2 decades had quietly begun to dissolve. Jimin inhaled deeply. I've never seen this door before. The young woman nodded. Neither have I. She looked toward Jungkook. I don't think anyone has. Jungkook stepped closer. The corridor beyond the doorway curved gently into the mountain. Its walls were carved from smooth white stone, unlike anything in the archive behind them. Delicate patterns flowed across the surface, resembling tree branches intertwined with musical notes. The air carried the faint scent of cedar, wildflowers, and freshly brewed coffee. Jungkook smiled through lingering tears. My father. Jimin looked around. He wanted this place to feel like home. Every few meters, small lanterns embedded within the walls awakened one after another, lighting their path without flame or electricity. The silence inside the corridor was comforting rather than unsettling. It felt as though the mountain itself was quietly welcoming them. After several minutes of walking, they reached an enormous circular chamber. Jungkook stopped in astonishment. The room resembled a private observatory hidden beneath the earth. Above them, an immense crystal dome had been built into the mountain, allowing sunlight from the outside world to filter through a natural opening high above. Golden rays cascaded downward, filling the chamber with breathtaking warmth. In the center stood a magnificent oak tree. Its trunk was ancient. Its branches stretched toward the crystal ceiling. Its leaves shimmered with vibrant green despite existing deep beneath the mountain. Jimin whispered in disbelief. An oak tree. Jungkook immediately recognized it. It looks exactly like the one where we made our promise. The young woman smiled softly. It isn't similar. She looked toward Jungkook. It is the same tree. He stared at her. That's impossible. When the river changed course years ago, your father secretly moved the young tree here to preserve it. Jungkook slowly approached. His fingertips gently touched the rough bark. Instantly, another memory surfaced. 2 boys laughing beneath summer sunlight. Fireflies dancing around them. A pinky promise. A promise neither child had understood. His chest tightened. Every important moment of his childhood somehow led back to this tree. Beneath its branches rested a simple wooden bench. On the seat lay a neatly folded blue scarf. Jungkook froze. He recognized it immediately. His father had worn it every winter. He slowly picked it up. The fabric still carried the faint scent of pine and coffee. Jimin quietly looked away, allowing Jungkook a private moment. Beside the scarf rested a small wooden box. Unlike everything else they had discovered, this box had no lock. Only a handwritten note. Open this only after you forgive yourself. Jungkook stared at the sentence. His voice barely rose above a whisper. Myself. Jimin stepped closer. You've blamed yourself too. Jungkook looked at him. I left my dream behind. No. Jimin gently shook his head. You chose something greater. But part of me still wonders. What if I had signed that contract? The young woman smiled. If you had. She glanced toward the archive behind them. And none of this would have opened. Jungkook slowly closed his eyes. For the first time since abandoning his dream, he stopped questioning the decision. He carefully lifted the lid. Inside rested 3 objects. A silver fountain pen, a faded concert ticket, and a sealed envelope addressed simply, to my son. Jungkook immediately recognized the pen. His father had used it to compose music. The concert ticket puzzled him. Its date was 20 years old. Its location, the National Symphony Hall. Jungkook frowned. My father attended this concert. Jimin leaned closer. No. His expression softened. He performed there. Jungkook looked up sharply. What? The young woman nodded. Before everything happened, your father wasn't just a researcher. He was one of the country's most respected composers. Jungkook's eyes widened. No. He abandoned his music. To protect the archive. The realization struck him with overwhelming force. His father had sacrificed the same dream Jungkook had just given up. History had almost repeated itself. Except this time, the sacrifice had not been made out of fear. It had been made out of love. Jungkook slowly unfolded the final envelope. Inside rested only 1 page. The handwriting was steady, calm, almost peaceful. If you have reached this room, then I know one thing with absolute certainty. You chose love before ambition. That means I succeeded, not in hiding the truth, but in raising someone better than I ever was. Tears quietly blurred Jungkook's vision again. Do not repeat my greatest mistake. I believed protecting the world required disappearing from the people I loved. It doesn't. Protect the truth. But don't abandon your own happiness. Jungkook's breathing became uneven. The words continued. Your dream was never your enemy. Don't bury it because of me. One day. Sing again. Silence settled gently across the chamber. Jungkook lowered the letter. He finally understood. His father had never wanted him to sacrifice everything forever. Only long enough to discover what truly mattered. Jimin smiled for the first time that day without sadness. I think he already knew what you'd choose. Jungkook laughed softly. He always knew me better than I knew myself. Before anyone spoke again, a gentle breeze drifted through the crystal dome above. Thousands of oak leaves rustled together. Something white fluttered downward from the highest branch. Jungkook instinctively caught it. It was an old photograph. Unlike every other picture they had found, this one had never faded. It showed Jungkook as a little boy sleeping peacefully on his father's shoulder, while Jimin walked beside them holding the glass jar filled with glowing fireflies. On the back, written in elegant handwriting, were the final words his father had ever left inside the mountain. A dream can wait. Love should never have to. Jungkook smiled through tears as sunlight poured across the ancient oak tree, illuminating the photograph in his hands, while the mountain, having finally surrendered every secret it had protected for 19 years, seemed to breathe a quiet sigh of relief, leaving behind not the weight of unanswered mysteries, but the enduring certainty that the greatest promises are never the ones that chain people to the past. They are the ones that guide them gently toward a future worth living. Morning arrived quietly over the mountains, painting the crystal dome with streams of golden sunlight that filtered through the ancient oak tree. Tiny particles of dust drifted lazily through the warm light, giving the hidden chamber the peaceful stillness of a place that had finally fulfilled its purpose. For the first time in 19 years, nothing inside the mountain seemed to be waiting anymore. Jungkook remained beneath the oak tree, the photograph still resting in his hands. He looked at the smiling faces frozen in time. His father, a young Jimin, and himself, asleep without a single worry in the world. So this is what he spent his life protecting, Jungkook whispered. Jimin smiled softly. No. Jungkook looked at him. He protected you. The words settled deeply inside Jungkook's heart. His father had never considered the archive his greatest achievement. It had always been his son. The young woman slowly approached them, carrying another wooden case she had discovered inside a nearby cabinet. Unlike the others, this one bore a brass nameplate. Property of Director Kang. She placed it gently upon the bench. I think this belonged to your father. Jungkook carefully opened it. Inside lay dozens of handwritten musical scores, tied together with faded blue ribbons. He stared at the first page. The title read, Symphony of Promises. Composer, Director Kang. His father had never stopped writing music, even while hiding beneath the mountain, even while protecting the archive. The pages were filled with notes, revisions, and personal comments written in the margins. Too hopeful. Needs more silence here. This reminds me of Jungkook laughing at age 6. Final movement only after he learns forgiveness. Jungkook gently laughed through tears. He composed my childhood. Jimin nodded. I told you. You've been humming his melody your whole life. The young woman carefully turned another page. Folded between the sheets rested a small flash drive. Modern. Completely out of place among the old manuscripts. Attached to it was another note. For the future. She looked toward Jungkook. This wasn't here 19 years ago. Jimin frowned. What do you mean? The technology didn't exist. Silence fell. Only one explanation remained. Someone had entered the mountain after Jungkook's father disappeared. Very recently. Jungkook slowly picked up the flash drive. It means someone else knows this place. Before anyone could respond, a soft electronic chime echoed through the chamber. Everyone instinctively turned toward the archive entrance. The giant clockwork machine had started moving again. Not quickly. Not violently. Slowly. Deliberately. One brass panel folded outward, revealing a hidden screen concealed within the mechanism. Static flickered. Then an image appeared. Not an old recording. A live transmission. The screen showed the elderly man they had met on the rooftop. Mr. Han. He was bruised. His coat was torn. But he was alive. Jungkook stepped forward. Mr. Han. The old man smiled wearily. I knew you'd find the final room. You thought I died. He chuckled. I've survived worse. The relief on Jimin's face was unmistakable. Mr. Han's expression soon became serious. I don't have much time. Behind him, alarms echoed somewhere in the distance. They've discovered the warehouse. They'll eventually discover the mountain. Jungkook tightened his grip on the flash drive. What should we do? Mr. Han looked directly into his eyes. Finish what your father started. Reveal the truth. Jungkook glanced around the archive. There are enough documents here to change history. Mr. Hand slowly nodded. Exactly. But remember something your father understood too late. Jungkook listened carefully. The truth doesn't need revenge. It needs courage. The transmission crackled. Its signal weakened. Mr. Hand smiled one last time. And Jungkook. Yes. Don't give up music. The screen faded into static. Then darkness. The chamber became silent once more. Jungkook looked toward the enormous collection surrounding him. Thousands of journals. Countless recordings. Decades of carefully preserved evidence. His father had trusted him with all of it. Jimin quietly sat beneath the oak tree. So, what happens now? Jungkook looked upward through the crystal dome. Blue sky stretched peacefully above the mountain. For the first time in years, the future no longer frightened him. He smiled. We go home. Jimin raised an eyebrow. Home. We've spent too long chasing the past. He carefully folded his father's final letter and placed it inside his jacket. I think he'd want us to start living again. The young woman smiled. I think you're right. Before leaving, Jungkook walked once more toward the old piano standing quietly beside the archive wall. Its polished wood had survived decades beneath the mountain. He gently lifted the lid. The keys were perfectly clean, as though someone had played them only yesterday. He sat down. His fingers hesitated above the keyboard. Then, the melody came naturally. The lullaby his father had sung. The tune he had unknowingly carried inside his heart since childhood. The first note echoed gently through the mountain. Then another. And another. Jimin closed his eyes. Tears quietly rolled down his face. The young woman smiled silently. The ancient oak leaves rustled softly above them, almost moving in rhythm with the music. As the final note faded into silence, a warm breeze drifted through the chamber. A single oak leaf floated gently onto the piano keys. Jungkook picked it up and smiled. I'll keep my promise. Not the promise of sacrifice. Not the promise of endless searching. But the promise his father had quietly hoped for all along. To protect the truth. To cherish the people beside him. And to never abandon the music that had always connected three hearts across 19 years of silence. With the mountain finally at peace, Jungkook, Jimin, and their new companions slowly walked toward the sunlight waiting beyond the hidden passage, carrying with them not only the archive that could change history, but also a renewed purpose. To honor the past without becoming prisoners of it, to build a future where truth and compassion could exist together, and to ensure that the melody born from an old promise beneath an oak tree would continue to echo for generations yet to come. The mountain welcomed them with crisp morning air as they emerged from the hidden passage. Sunlight spilled across the pine-covered slopes, washing away the darkness that had surrounded them for what felt like an entire lifetime. Birds sang from the treetops, and the scent of damp earth mixed with wildflowers drifted through the gentle breeze. It was the first peaceful morning Jungkook could remember in years. For several minutes, none of them spoke. The silence no longer felt heavy. It felt earned. Jungkook stood at the edge of the cliff overlooking the valley below. Far in the distance, the city shimmered beneath the rising sun, unaware that a secret buried for 19 years had finally been uncovered. He slipped his father's fountain pen into his jacket pocket. I used to think success meant standing on the biggest stage in the world, he said quietly. Jimin walked beside him. And now? Jungkook smiled. Now I think success is waking up without regrets. Jimin looked toward the endless horizon. I've been waiting a long time to hear you say that. The young woman gently closed the hidden entrance behind them. Massive stone slabs slid silently into place, disappearing beneath moss and vines until the mountain looked untouched once again. No one would ever know it's here, Jungkook murmured. They aren't supposed to, she replied. The archive doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to history. They began descending the narrow mountain trail. Morning mist drifted between towering cedar trees, and rays of sunlight pierced the forest canopy in brilliant shafts of gold. Every step carried them farther from the secrets beneath the mountain and closer to a future neither had dared imagine. Halfway down the trail, they reached a quiet clearing where an old stone monument stood surrounded by blooming white lilies. Jungkook stopped. There was no name engraved upon it. Only a single sentence. For those who protected tomorrow, without asking to be remembered. He slowly knelt before the monument. Was this? The young woman nodded. It honors everyone who gave their lives protecting the archive. Jimin quietly placed the blue scarf beside the stone. For your father. A gentle breeze lifted one corner of the scarf before settling it gently against the monument. Jungkook bowed his head. Thank you. Not only to his father, but to everyone whose sacrifices had allowed him to stand there. As they continued walking, the forest gradually gave way to an old mountain road, where the van still waited exactly where they had left it. Its windshield glistened beneath the morning sun. The world looked ordinary again. Almost too ordinary after everything they had experienced. Just as they approached the vehicle, Jungkook's phone vibrated. The screen lit up with hundreds of missed calls. His former manager. News agencies. International producers. Friends. Reporters. Messages flooded the display. Where are you? The world is looking for you. Your contract withdrawal has become international news. Please call immediately. Jungkook quietly locked the screen again. Jimin glanced at him. Aren't you curious? I am. But I'm not ready. The young woman smiled. Sometimes the loudest stories can wait. Jungkook nodded. They've already waited 19 years. Another vibration interrupted him. This time it was a voicemail. Without thinking, he pressed play. His manager's exhausted voice filled the quiet mountain road. Jungkook, I don't know what's happening, but listen carefully. She paused, struggling to catch her breath. The orchestra refused to replace you. Jungkook frowned. They what? They canceled the entire international announcement. His eyes widened. The conductor said. Her voice softened. That dreams built on unfinished hearts never become beautiful music. Silence followed. Jungkook slowly lowered the phone. Jimin laughed quietly. I like your conductor. So do I. The young woman leaned against the van. What will you tell them? Jungkook looked back toward the mountain. The truth. Jimin smiled. The entire truth. Jungkook shook his head gently. No. Only the part that's mine to tell. He understood now. Some truths belong to history. Others belong to memory. His father's archive would eventually be revealed through the proper channels, carefully and responsibly. But the deeply personal promises, sacrifices, and quiet acts of love shared between father, son, and friend did not need headlines. They only needed to be remembered. As they climbed into the van, the compass resting inside Jungkook's pocket suddenly gave one soft vibration. He pulled it out. The needle no longer pointed toward the mountain, nor toward any distant destination. Instead, it spun once slowly before coming to rest, pointing directly at him. Jungkook stared in confusion. The young woman smiled knowingly. It has nowhere left to guide you. Jimin looked at the compass. It means the journey is over. Jungkook gently closed his fingers around it. No. He smiled warmly. I think it means the next journey is finally mine to choose. The van rolled quietly down the winding mountain road, leaving behind the hidden observatory and the ancient archive that had changed their lives forever. Ahead, the valley stretched beneath a brilliant blue sky, filled with possibilities untouched by fear, secrets, or sacrifice. For the first time since childhood, Jungkook wasn't following a map, a promise, or someone else's expectations. He was simply moving forward, with Jimin beside him, his father's melody alive in his heart, and the freedom to dream again. Autumn arrived quietly a year later. Golden leaves drifted through the city streets as people hurried beneath clear blue skies, unaware that history had changed forever in ways few of them would ever fully understand. The truth hidden beneath the mountain had been carefully entrusted to independent historians, legal authorities, and preservation experts. The documents had been authenticated one by one. Long-forgotten names were finally restored to the historical record. Families who had spent decades searching for answers received the justice they thought would never come. No sensational headlines revealed every secret. No dramatic interviews exposed every sacrifice. Some stories belonged to the world. Others belonged only to the hearts that had lived them. Jungkook had insisted on that distinction. He remembered Mr. Han's final advice. The truth doesn't need revenge, it needs courage. The old mountain remained untouched. Its hidden archive became a protected historical site known only to a handful of trusted guardians. The ancient oak tree continued growing peacefully beneath the crystal dome. Every spring, new leaves appeared. Every autumn, old ones drifted silently onto the stone floor. Time moved forward exactly as Jungkook's father had hoped. Life slowly found its rhythm again. Jungkook returned to music. Not because he wanted fame. Not because he wanted applause. But because music had always been the language, connecting 3 generations, separated by silence. Months after leaving the mountain, he stood once again inside the same concert hall where everything had begun. The golden contract that had once remained unsigned no longer mattered. Instead, he accepted a different invitation. To compose. To create. To tell stories through melodies instead of speeches. His first composition carried only a simple title. The Old Promise. No promotional campaign explained its meaning. No interview revealed its inspiration. Only those who truly listened could hear the quiet conversation hidden inside the music. A father's farewell. A friend's unwavering loyalty. A son's forgiveness. When the orchestra performed its premiere, the audience remained silent long after the final note faded. Some cried without understanding why. Others smiled through tears they couldn't explain. Music had succeeded where words never could. Jimin chose a quieter life. He never sought recognition for the years he had spent protecting Jungkook's future. He declined every offer to share his story publicly. Whenever someone thanked him, he simply smiled and answered the same way. I only kept a promise. His hearing never fully recovered. Yet he never considered it a loss. Whenever Jungkook played the melody his father had written, Jimin would sit on the left side of the piano, close his eyes, and quietly hum along. He never missed a single performance. Not because he had to. Because he wanted to. Mr. Han survived. Although age eventually persuaded him to retire from his lifelong responsibilities, he often visited the mountain in early spring. He would place fresh flowers beneath the old oak tree before sitting silently on the wooden bench for hours. He never spoke much. He simply smiled whenever he heard distant piano music echoing through the underground chamber. The young woman became the archive's first official curator. She dedicated her life to preserving not only documents, but also the ordinary human stories hidden between them. She often reminded young researchers, facts explain history. Kindness explains people. One snowy evening, several years later, Jungkook and Jimin returned to their childhood hometown. The river flowed peacefully beneath a newly rebuilt bridge. Children laughed nearby, chasing one another across the grass exactly as they once had. The old oak tree that had originally stood beside the river was gone. Only a small stone circle remained where it had once taken root. Jungkook quietly knelt there. From his pocket, he removed the tiny glass jar Jimin had carried on the day they made their promise. Inside, dozens of fireflies glowed softly in the fading twilight. Jimin looked at him in surprise. "You kept it all these years." Jungkook smiled. "I promised I'd return it." Together, they opened the lid. The fireflies slowly rose into the evening sky, drifting above the quiet river like living stars. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. Some promises ended with words. The greatest ones ended with understanding. As darkness settled over the valley, Jungkook looked toward the first stars appearing overhead. "My father once told me that courage meant choosing kindness when fear gave you every excuse not to." Jimin smiled. "He was right." Jungkook nodded. "So were you." They stood there until the last firefly disappeared into the night. For a long moment, the world became wonderfully still. No secrets remained hidden. No unanswered questions lingered between them. Only gratitude. Only peace. Only the quiet certainty that love had always been stronger than sacrifice. Years later, visitors attending Jungkook's concerts often wondered why every performance ended with the same gentle melody. They never knew its true origin. They only knew that whenever those final notes echoed through the hall, Jungkook would look toward the left side of the audience, where Jimin always sat with the same calm smile, and then toward the empty seat beside him, where a folded blue scarf was placed before every performance. No one ever occupied that seat. It remained reserved for the man whose greatest dream had been willingly surrendered, so that his son could one day discover something even more precious than success. And somewhere deep beneath the mountain, hidden beneath the roots of the ancient oak tree, the old clockwork machine continued turning with quiet, unwavering precision. Not because it was still guarding secrets, but because it had become a timeless reminder that dreams may inspire a life, promises may shape a destiny. But it is love, freely chosen and faithfully kept, that changes lives forever.